Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Kilani, and I'm a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, and I'll be chairing this brilliant panel today. Just to start with, I'm sure people have sat through a few meetings, but I'm just going to start with explaining how the meeting's going to run for those who aren't aware. So we'll have all our speakers speaking for about 10 minutes each, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So in the discussion, we're going to be using a speaker slip system, and this is just to kind of allow for us to have a wide range of contributions and discussion. So members of the lovely team in pink t-shirts are going to be walking around with the slips, and you can fill them out and hand them back to them with what you'd like to say in the discussion. And then we'll have a few announcements, and then we'll go back to all our speakers to finish us off. So the title of this meeting is 75 Years of the Nakba, Why Palestine is Still the Issue. And I think the speakers we've got are pretty impressive to be able to talk on this subject. So to start with, I really want to welcome Ramsis Kilani. Ramsis is a German Palestinian activist. And he is part of Marx 21, which is part of the International Socialist Tendency. And he's one of the main organizers of the Nakba 75 campaign, which is campaigning against the demo bans in Berlin. So welcome.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for having me here on this panel. I'd like to start with a quote by the Palestinian writer and activist Ghassan Kanafani, which I think lost none of its relevance for today. The quote is, "The Palestinian cause is not a cause for Palestinians only, but a cause for every revolutionary, wherever they are, as a cause of the exploited and oppressed masses in our era." I think what makes this quote so important is that it not only stands for an abstract call for solidarity, but also for the necessity of internationalism and shared interests in the Palestinian struggle for liberation and freedom. That connects it to the working class internationally, in the UK, in Germany, and especially in the region surrounding Palestine. This struggle against the settler colonist project the Palestinians are leading for 75 years of ongoing Nakba and even longer has not been defeated, despite the overwhelming support of the Zionist project from the imperialist world powers from here to overseas and beyond. And I think yet the Palestinians, which is clearly obvious to us, have shown again and again that their national and social oppression by the apartheid regime of Israel will always be answered with resistance, as we currently are also seeing in the West Bank, with new forms of armed resistance, new groups arriving and defying the Palestinian Authority and its collaboration with the state of Israel and the Zionist project of Palestine. This heroic resistance in all of its form and all of its creativity is enormously astonishing, despite everything that is being brought on the table against the Palestinians. Still, I think it alone cannot achieve freedom, and that international support, international solidarity, and the struggle in the entire region, the revolutionary uprisings we have seen, are the key to freeing Palestine once and for all, and establish a society where people can live in dignity, equality, no matter their ethnicity, no matter their religion and their background. I think that is the aim we should strive for. We have seen the astonishing general strike from the river to the sea in 2021 after what happened around Sheikh Jarrah. We have seen the international Palestine solidarity movement reaching new heights, but we have also seen a rise in repression. This stems from the fact that imperialism has a clear goal with the Zionist project and with supporting it in the region with a very unique way of capital flow without wanting more than fulfilling and securing its imperialist interests in the entire region by the Israeli state. The Israeli state has ethnically cleansed the Palestinians not only from a major part of their homelands, but also from the key areas and sections of production. And I think, therefore, it is important that we also see who is the driving force, who can change the facts on the ground, who can support the heroic Palestinian resistance and struggle for liberation. And I think these are the massive fighting against the Arab regimes too in the region, and always with connection and a close interconnected struggle with the Palestinian cause, inspiring them and inspiring it back. Beyond that, I think we also in the imperialist core have a role to play in this internationalism. And also here we have faced enormous repression. And that's why I want to tell you something about the demo bans in Berlin we had to resist against. There's a very special relation of the German state with the Israeli state, which is often explained by some shame or some guilt a German society is feeling, but I think this still doesn't hit the spot, because there are clear ambitions by German nationalism, German imperialism on this wrong and anti-Semitic equation of Judaism with the state of Israel and Zionism. For Germany, as to abstract from its horrific past and the crimes against humanity it committed with the genocide against the European Jews with the Holocaust, by explaining that now it can take responsibility in the world again because it is standing in solidarity with the Jew, with the equation of the Jew being the state of Israel, its interests, and Zionism, and with thereby repressing anything that stands against this important state ideology called Staatsräson in German even, so the reason of the existence of the German state. The repression, of course, faces head-on Palestinians who object this narrative, who say there are crimes against humanity happening in Palestine, and also against anti-Zionist Jews in Germany, also competing with this narrative, showing that this equation is wrong. And therefore, with the uprise of Palestine solidarity, even in Germany, where it's, I think, especially hard, even for the left, even within the radical left, there are pro-Zionist tendencies, if you can imagine it, and very militantly so in many cases. That is the context of the demonstration bans in Berlin, which started last year and were affecting anything, any form of assembly that was in any way connected to Palestine, even raising watermelons, if you can imagine that. This was forbidden, was a clear assault on fundamental democratic rights of freedom of speech and the right to assembly, where we, after we got arrested last year with 25 activists, started an internationalist campaign that was also trying to explain to Germans and especially to the working class that it's also in their interest to fight back these demo bans because they are an alarming door opener for further attacks on our rights to protest, on our rights to strike. And the same arguments that are. We can see a similar development now in France, I would say, with the attacks and the repression that has been tested with the laws that have been legitimized by attacks on Muslims in the banlieues that are now being weaponized against the strike movement as a whole. And that's why the left also has a special duty to fight against these forms of racism and these forms of state repression that try to attack the apparently weakest part of the chain to develop more and more repression in the class struggle from above. And that's why we had to fight. That's why we had to broaden this front against what is happening in Germany. We included
1 minute left.
We included trade unionists, we included Jewish comrades, we included climate activists, which was not an easy thing to do in Germany, because most of the Fridays for Future international statements always had a footnote. Fridays for Future Germany does not support this. Yeah, so it was a very intense struggle. And of course, our demo was banned again for the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, of the Palestinian catastrophe. Still, we managed to bring around 500 people because our Jewish comrades in Berlin, because our Jewish comrades in coordination with us set up an assembly where the police afterwards, with our combined strength and our shared protest, gave out the lie anti-Semitism. Palestinians disrupt a Jewish demonstration. So it was an open lie, and many people were arrested, dozens of people. There were bones broken by the police while crushing our demonstration of Jews and Muslims and Palestinians alike. Their argument for the demo bans were openly racist, saying that Palestinians and the Muslim community and this culture in general is too emotionalized to protest, is too keen to violence as such. We have shown a new generation of activists by resisting, by defying that demo ban, that our main enemy is also the German state that is directly acting against us, and that it's not only necessary to have a revolutionary solution for the Palestine question, but also for the Germany question and the UK question. I think that's also why we are here. And for that, I think we have to get organized like this. Here you can join the Socialist Workers' Party and in your countries, the International Socialist Tendency and its tradition. We in Germany, as Marx 21, want to be the tribune of the oppressed and won't ever just accept that Palestinians are attacked and deprived of their basic human rights. Join us and support us in that struggle.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Ramsis. Now, just to say, to remind those in the room or those that have come late, for the discussion we're having the speaker system, so this is why the people are walking around with the slips. If you want to make a contribution, please grab one of them. Okay, so now to invite our next speaker. Some might know him from viral videos on Twitter and pointing out the hypocrisy around Israeli apartheid in Irish Parliament. But Richard Boyd Barrett is a member of the Irish Parliament for People Before Profit and also a member of the Socialist Workers Network, which is also a part of the International Socialist Tendency. So welcome, Richard.
Thanks, comrades. There's something incredibly Orwellian about the attempts to demonize those who stand up for Palestine and who demand an end to the Zionist regime, claiming that we're anti-Semitic, that we're terrorists, that we're defending somehow something that is indefensible. Because, as with Orwellian logic, the truth is the exact opposite. The exact opposite. And the 75th anniversary of the Nakba reminds us of that fact, that the entire Zionist project is and has been and continues to be an act of horrendous racism, of ethnic cleansing, of terrorism, of violence and oppression and persecution of an entirely innocent people who have done nothing wrong, the Palestinian people. And I mean, it's almost incredible that you have to say that, but it's why the 75th anniversary is so important. Because the Israeli state project, the Zionist state project, was born in a bloody, murderous act of ethnic cleansing involving massacres of innocent men, women, and children in Palestinian villages like Deir Yassin, like Tantura, where they're now finding the mass graves. Nearly 1 million people driven out with the most brutal, vile terror from their homes, resulting in millions of people now being dispossessed, driven to the far reaches of the globe, millions living in the most appalling conditions, in refugee camps, in conditions that are inhuman, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, and so many other parts of the world, and obviously the unbelievable, inhumane treatment of the people of Gaza. 2 million people locked up, besieged now for, 15, 17 years, in an absolutely criminal siege of 2 million people in a tiny, tiny enclave, living in conditions that even the United Nations suggest are a permanent humanitarian catastrophe. And then the ongoing ethnic cleansing, seizure of Palestinian land, even in the lands that were supposed to be under the joke that was Oslo and the so-called two-state solution, but even that wasn't good enough for Israel and its supporters, but continue to seize day in, day out, ethnically cleansed in Jerusalem and across the West Bank, terrorizing the Palestinian population day in, day out. And yet we somehow are the ones who have the problem because we dare to speak out against that. When everything about it is racist and is about terrorism and persecution of the Palestinian people. And the important thing to say is it's not just us who are saying it. Recently, Joseph Biden, the President of the United States, came to Ireland. Oh my God, was that a sickening event as far as I'm concerned. And you had the great and the good of Irish society welcoming Joseph Biden as some sort of wonderful alternative to the horror, and the undoubted horror it is, of Donald Trump, as if he was some sort of force for progress and civilization and democracy. But of course, we boycotted his visit to the Irish Parliament. We had nothing to do with it. We refused to welcome, but condemned his visit. And there are many reasons for that. One, that he was one of the major cheerleaders and champions for the criminal US-UK war in Iraq that claimed the lives of nearly 1 billion people. But the other one that we chose to remind people of, that tells you everything about the truth about the Zionist project, is that Joseph Biden, in a sort of uncharacteristically honest moment where US imperialism actually says what it's really about, he said, if Israel did not exist, the United States would have to invent it. Now think about that. And he went on to say, we would need to station tens and tens of thousands of US troops in the Middle East. And in that comment, he explains the reality of the Zionist project. It has nothing to do with protecting Jewish people against anti-Semitism. It has nothing to do with protecting democracy or standing the boundaries of democracy, but it is about US imperial control of the Middle East. And that's what it was always about. And of course, his words echo something that is, we also reminded people when he was visiting, the words of the Governor General of Jerusalem in 1936, a man called Ronald Storrs, the British Governor General of Jerusalem, when he said, asked about his support for the Zionist project, British support for the Zionist project and the state that was about to be set up, he said, we wish to create a loyal little Jewish Ulster in the Middle East to guard against a potentially hostile sea of Arabism. And in both of those comments, first from Storrs, the British imperial sponsors of the Zionist project, and then Biden, the US sponsors of that project, you get to the truth of what the Zionist project is about and all of the suffering that the Palestinians have had to endure, which was about a consciously worked out strategy of divide and rule. And the reference to Ulster, for those who don't know, was a province in Ireland, and a strategy that had been deployed in Ireland of apartheid. In Ireland, it had a different name, was the penal laws, a set of laws that were about a systematic discrimination against the Irish population as part of a colonial settler project to control Ireland, to steal its resources, and to use racism and the tactic of divide and rule in Ireland, setting Catholic against Protestant in order for the British Empire to control the area. And they were absolutely conscious about exporting that exact model to Palestine to do exactly the same thing, to control the region and to set Jewish people against the Arab, the Palestinian population for the purposes of the Western powers to control a region that they knew was going to be critically important because of the presence of the most important commodity in modern capitalism had been discovered in that region, oil. And the profits for the oil companies, the Western oil companies. That's what it was about. And the Palestinians have suffered horrendously as a result of that. And racism was a key tool. That's what the apartheid is. It's a tactic of divide and rule. So therefore, far from those who stand with the Palestinians being guilty of anti-Semitism, the opposite is the truth. If you are against racism, if you abhor anti-Semitism or any form of discrimination, if you abhor imperialism and war and empire, you are duty bound to stand with the Palestinian people in their resistance. And I would just say finally, we have to call out the disgusting double standards of imperialism in this regard. Rightly, people have said what Putin is doing in Ukraine is a brutal imperialist invasion. illegal occupation, war crimes, crimes against humanity, undoubtedly true. But isn't every single one of those crimes being committed every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year since 1948 by Israel in Palestine? Would anybody possibly deny that? Now, the Palestinians are not asking for missiles from NATO. They're not asking to join an imperialist alliance. They're just asking, maybe you could stop selling weapons to the Israeli state to kill Palestinian people. Maybe we could do as we did with apartheid South Africa and say a regime that is based on apartheid, racism, ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, war crimes, day in, day out in Gaza on the West Bank. Maybe we could say that is not acceptable in a civilized country. That's what we're asking. I'll just conclude in saying, though, but the one thing is the Palestinians will never stop resisting. They will never stop resisting. But we need to help them accelerate the end of their unacceptable suffering. We endured that divide and rule tactic for 700 or 800 years, and that struggle has advanced, and it will in Palestine. The victory of the Palestinians is inevitable, but we don't want that suffering to continue a day longer than is necessary, because it is absolutely appalling what's being done to the Palestinians. Free Palestine from the river to the sea.
Hey, thank you so much, everyone, and thanks, Richard. So our next speaker, apart from being a brilliant artist and rapper, is an active campaigner, actively campaigns and speaks out for Palestinian liberation, as well as injustice everywhere, such as the Grenfell fire and Tory racism, Europe imperialism, and so on. So I'd really like to welcome Lowkey.
Thank you very much. Thank you. At first, I'd like to send a message to the management of SOAS. As an alumni of this institution, who SOAS seem to care enough about to put on their website, SOAS needs to stop virtue signaling and moralizing and give your workers what they want. SOAS needs to stop stealing the wages of lecturers that are going on strike. Stop suppressing those that are the heart, the lungs, and the spine of this institution, and give them exactly what they want. Now, to deal with the question of the Nakba 75 years on, we have to analyze, first and foremost, the position that the Zionist project is in today. It is more imperiled than at any time previously. There are several fronts that are open with Israel that it thought were closed. To start with, Jenin and Nablus have revolutionized the West Bank, despite the best efforts of the traitorous Palestinian Authority. Despite their best efforts, the West Bank is now armed. We saw an operation just a week or so ago on what is supposed to be a very stable security coordination front between Israel and Egypt on the edge of Gaza. An Egyptian soldier, which is part of a military, which is the largest recipient of US military aid, which is decades deep into a strategic coordination relationship with the Israeli military, snuck across into Gaza and carried out an operation. This is further rendering Israel more and more precarious. We've seen just the last week in the occupied Golan Heights of Syria, Syrians coming out and protesting directly against the Israeli military and occupation. And actually, in Lebanon, not only have we seen the liberation of the south of Lebanon, we have in the last week seen people move across into what is part of the Zionist entity and set up tents. These are Lebanese setting up tents on what is supposedly Israeli territory. Now remember that Israel was not driven out of the south of Lebanon by NGOs and flags of football matches. Israel was driven out of the south of Lebanon by armed resistance. And what can we say of Gaza? Gaza that has stood strong, that has refused the guinea pig laboratory status that the Israeli military hopes to achieve for it. Gaza, which has redefined the definition of dignity and steadfastness, which has continually pushed Israel back, limited the military adventures that Israel has attempted to impose on it. We are of generations that saw what they called Operation Cast Lead, which led to 1,400 plus Palestinians being killed. We lived through Protective Edge, 2,400 Palestinians being killed. Analyze where we are. We are not at the stage of peak Israel. Israel was not able to carry out the level of human damage that it had carried out in Gaza previously on the last 3 times that it has pummeled Gaza. And that is because of a coordinated response of the Palestinian factions. And we have to also remember that in May 2021, part of the reason in Ma'raka Sayf al-Quds, the Battle of Jerusalem, part of the reason that Israel were limited in what they could do was because you had simultaneously on one day 60,000 Palestinian construction workers within the political unit of Israel go on strike. And what did that lead to? That led to losses of $40 million to the Israeli economy for just that day alone. You saw Palestinian transport workers cancel 300 journeys in one day. You also have to remember that the Israeli economy relies on reserve units from the Israeli military, meaning that the economy is full of reservists in the Israeli military. When they attempt an assertion like they did in Gaza in 2021, they pull out people from the traditional economy. That, in addition to the resistance, being able to limit the ability of the airport in what they call Tel Aviv to function, it meant that the Israeli shekel fell in its value because of this period of time of ungovernability of Palestinians. And this is what led to what some have termed economic paralysis during that period. And what happened here in this country? So while Israel was attempting to pummel the people of Gaza, Palestine actionists took to the roof of Leicester, the Elbit Systems arms factory in Russia. Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms company, had 10 sites across this country. It doesn't anymore. And you want to know why? 2 words: Palestine action. And what happened in May 2021 is that for 6 days on the trot, that factory was closed. Israel looked out into a world where it was harder to exert the types of force that it had in the past. And what happened? The police went to the fire brigade and they said, please help us get these 6 people off the roof of this arms factory. And do you know what the fire brigade said to them? No. They said, no, we're with them. And then the police appealed to the community and they said, help us get these 6 people off of the top of this factory. And you know what the community said back to them? No, we're with them. And the police were blocked from removing the Palestine actionists from the top of that factory for 6 days. That was all part of the reason that Israel pulled back from its usual military escapades in Gaza. But when we think about our position vis-a-vis Palestine, we do not have to speak in theoretical terms. Israel is operating in this country very, very effectively. And one of the worst aspects of the past few years in which we saw a political project which many of us in this room would have considered ourselves part of, assassinated. One of the worst aspects was appeasement to some of the ideas that have been spoken about tonight in terms of re-portraying who we are and who the Palestinians are. But let's be clear, another process has played out along that time. And that process is not just about the theater of politics, it's also about the slightly less sexy aspect of data war. The Ministry of Defense and the Home Office in this country have their data handled by a company called Oracle. Oracle's top shareholder, founder, and overall ruler is a gentleman by the name Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is the highest donor to the IDF in the history of the Friends of the IDF organization. This company has access to Britain's Home Office and Ministry of Defense data. This is a problem. Benjamin Netanyahu was offered the directorship of the very company Oracle, which stores Britain's Ministry of Defense and Home Office data. That is a national security issue. We've also seen in the past few years, Patrick Drahi, the French-Israeli billionaire, become the top shareholder in British Telecom, which is a key backbone of Britain's infrastructure. Well, when this shareholder takeover was announced, the British government said they were investigating this takeover on the basis of national security. Unfortunately, nobody in the media actually looked into what they could possibly be concerned about with Patrick Drahi's role at British Telecom. Well, what I found when looking into it is he's also the owner of I-24 channel, which employs several former Israeli military and intelligence figures. He bought the French newspaper Liberation, founded by Jean-Paul Sartre, and actually put in charge of it a former agent from Israeli military intelligence unit 8200. So I would guess that the British government launched a national security investigation into this takeover of British intelligence on the fact that they suspect that Patrick Drahi may have a relationship with Israeli intelligence. So while this has been happening, while the Labour Party has been on an industrial scale, dehumanizing and demonizing and pushing outside the realms of acceptable political subjectivity those who stand with the Palestinians, Palestine Action succeeded in shutting down the headquarters for Israel's largest arms company in the constituency of Kurdistan. On top of that, Palestine Action succeeded in forcing Elbit Systems to sell its largest subsidiary in England, Ferranti Technologies in Oldham, at a loss. In addition to that, the Ministry of Defense cancelled £280 million worth of contracts with Elbit Systems, thanks to Palestine Action. So just to finish, I would like to read a letter that Palestine Action will be publishing within the next few days. We, the undersigned, call for the freedom of all Palestine actions. We demand the charges are dropped against those already incarcerated and at risk of prison over their work to disrupt the criminal production of Israeli weapons on British soil. We stand with those who have sacrificed their liberty to challenge colonial violence, and we call on others to do the same until they, the Palestinian people, are free. The British government signed Palestine away in 1917, and today it is openly hosting companies who arm the Israeli occupying regime to enable it to further entrench its system of domination and oppression. Israel's largest weapons manufacturer, Elbit Systems, which has several sites across England and Wales, are manufacturers of an array of weaponry, including drones equipped with payloads, surveillance technology, and components for tanks and fighter jets. American weaponry firm Teledyne also export a wide assortment of munitions to the state of Israel, and recently, Rafael, an Israeli state-owned company, purchased a factory in Newcastle upon Tyne as part of the regime's planned expansion into Britain. Both Elbit and Rafael, as well as their suppliers, profit from the captive population of Palestine. They have turned civilians into a human laboratory where experimental weaponry can be tested, improved on, and then marketed as field-proven and branded as battle-tested. Britain has been an accessory to the Israeli apartheid regime for many consecutive governments. Its current refusal to respond to the calls from its own citizens to end its decades-long complicity led to the creation of Palestine Action. Since the network launched, hundreds of activists have taken heroic direct action to blockade, occupy, and dismantle the Israeli war machine in Britain. These actions have resulted in the closing down of 2 Elbit Systems sites and the loss of millions of pounds through the severance of MOD contracts. Palestine Action has inspired local communities across the country to rise up against these immoral factories which profit from the business of war and destruction. In response, the government has decided to prioritize its interest in protecting the military supply chain of a foreign apartheid state by incarcerating its own people. By choosing to side with the oppressor, the British state has made it a duty for those with influential platforms to speak out and take a stand for those risking their own liberty for the sake of justice. The heroes who have taken courageous action to expose and dismantle Britain's role in the colonization of Palestine should be celebrated and rewarded, not imprisoned. We therefore call for the release of all Palestine Action political prisoners and for charges to be dropped against all those facing sentences for simply doing what is necessary. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Lowkey. I'm sorry I'm trying to cut you short. But that's just to give us time for our final speaker, who is Sophia Beach. And Sophia is one of the organisers of the Brilliant Festival, Marxism Festival this year. She's also a Jewish socialist and she's on the Central Committee of the Socialist Workers' Party.
Not sure. Well, look, firstly, I just want to thank all of the previous speakers. It's an honour to share a panel and with people and to be in this room, to be honest, with all of us here who want to see an end to the Israeli state and a free Palestine. I think when we talk about 75 years on since the Nakba and why Palestine is still the issue, as Lowkey started with, we have to look at what is going on within the political regime of Israel at the moment and within the borders of historic Palestine. I think the reason why we have to look at the current political regime in Israel and what is going on is because I think the nature of it actually helps us to explain why we have the sort of solutions that we say when we say free Palestine. So, people may be aware, but we've seen a massive shift to the right in Israeli society. Netanyahu, along with his coalition of horrible right-wingers and Zionists like people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. We've seen a rise of settlers attacking Palestinians in, you know, what can only be described in the forms of sort of pogroms in Palestinian neighborhoods. And actually, I think what we have to say here is that, you know, this rise of the right within Israel is incredibly important for what we say about Palestinian liberation, because actually some of the moves that Netanyahu has made about, you know, questions of getting rid of the judicial systems and so on, and the pro-democracy process that we've seen within Palestine, actually Zionism faces one of the biggest crises that it's ever seen in its history. People are talking out and they disagree with Netanyahu. But on those protests, you do not see a single Palestinian flag being waved. These are people who are disagreeing over a strategy of how best to suppress Palestinians. And I think that this is what we have to say, right? Because actually, you know, you can see that there is not one person really taking up the question of Palestinian liberation when they are actually criticizing Netanyahu and the right-wing government. And I think that's why we have to come back to this, because it's not as though the oppression of Palestinians is because we have right-wing Zionists in power. It's not because Netanyahu is a bastard, which of course he is, right? This is about the nature of settler colonialism and of Zionism. Zionism has racism towards Palestinians in its very fabric. You could not have a Zionism that does not rest upon the displacement of Palestinians and the oppression of them. And I think we have to be clear about that. And I think for that, it means that, because of that, I think it means that the solution actually to a free Palestine does not lie within the borders of Israel. Well, if it doesn't lie within the borders of Israel, then where does it lie? And I think firstly, when I say this is not to diminish the incredibly brave resistance of the Palestinians over the last 75 years, as others have spoken about time and time again. When the cameras aren't there, when the world isn't watching, when the media isn't listening, Palestinians remind us that they still struggle on. And I think we have to celebrate that. I say that any time a Palestinian resisted Israeli apartheid or oppression, I support them wholeheartedly. But for Palestinians, we have to be honest, Palestinians are up against a unique enemy. There is no other state within this world that is quite like the state of Israel. It is an apartheid regime. It is a settler colonial regime. It is not just a racist one. And actually, in that apartheid regime, it is armed to the teeth. People have described Israel as rather being a state with an army as an army with a state. You know, we've spoken about the militarization of the Israeli economy and how absolutely the whole system is hell-bent and profits off of the displacement of Palestinians. It's the only country that has a unique deal with the states that others have mentioned. And I think, you know, this is important because Israel does not exist in a vacuum. Israel is part of a much broader network of imperialism and imperialist states across the Middle East. And whilst the working class people of the Middle East stand with Palestine, their rulers do not. Lowkey spoke about, you know, what Al-Sisi does in Egypt and the role of the Egyptian military. Actually, the ruling class of the neighboring regions in Israel, they want a piece of the pie, don't they? They want a position within the power structures that exist within the imperialist regime within Israel. So that's why, you know, if you look at the might of the Israeli army and the enemy which the Palestinians are up against, they cannot win through armed struggle on their own. That doesn't mean I don't 100% support their right to have armed struggle. Look, people have also mentioned things like the peace process, peace processes. They're not going to win through peace process. You cannot bargain with a colonialist. You know, people have mentioned the awful role that the Palestinian Authority has played within these things, working with the Israeli state time and time again. Actually, the 1993 Oslo Accords and the way in which the Israeli state has rolled back on them proves what we say right about a two-state solution. Edward Said said the Oslo Accords were an instrument of Palestinian surrender, and for the last 30 years, that has been proved true. We do not believe that you can have any form of a two-state solution within Palestine. Why? Because all of it is Palestine. From the river to the sea, like everybody has already said. A two-state solution would not address There's some 8 million Palestinian diaspora that are around the globe. It would not address the question of the right to return home. Some people who still have the keys to their houses when they were forced off of the land in 1948. So if I don't see a solution that doesn't address these questions, that doesn't say that every Palestinian has the right to return to their homeland, and there isn't a solution that doesn't see the disintegration of the state of Israel, then it is not a solution that I would support, and it is not a solution to the problem. So, how can we get the kind of solution that we want to see? I think firstly, international solidarity with Palestine is incredibly important. Now, this is not, of course, as a replacement for the struggles that go on within Palestine and the borders of Israel, but rather this is about fusing the struggles that we see take place across the globe. We've spoken about so many different things here at Marxism Festival. Palestine is just another thing that we have to raise in every struggle, every picket line, every protest that we go. We want to fuse that with international solidarity. You didn't mention it, but I think it's important to go through the unique attacks that we face here in Britain, because what does international solidarity look like? Sorry, is that 1 minute or 3 minutes? 3 minutes, cool. What does international solidarity look like with Palestine in Britain here today? Well, we have to be proud and we have to speak up about what happens in Palestine. The weaponization of anti-Semitism and the attacks of the left are something that is incredibly important. And actually, we have to say that Israel is an apartheid state. We say from the river to the sea, there is nothing anti-Semitic about those statements. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, and we have to keep saying it time and time again. Because, you know, Richard said that their narrative is Orwellian. It is, isn't it? Actually, the basis of Zionism is Orwellian. What did the founders of Zionism say? You know, they said that we wanted a land without people for a people without a land. That was a lie. There were already people there, Palestinian society, Christian. Their whole philosophy is based on a lie, and we have to speak out against that. This is really about an attack on the free speech about Palestine, and we have to say that we have to come back to it. And actually, you know, I'm proud to be organising a festival which has someone like Ken Loach and Jeremy Corbyn speaking at it, because we think that these people are strong, anti-racist activists, and there's nothing anti-Semitic about what they said. I'm proud to be a Jew that stands against the state of Israel. Anywhere, I have more in common with my Palestinian brothers and sisters than I do with the state of Israel. And there have always been Jews against Zionism. There have always been anti-Zionist Jews ever since, you know, the late 1800s when Zionism was founded as a movement. And I think we have to say that because Jews are not a homogenous group, and there are people like me that stand with Palestine. You know, why is it really that we see these attacks on the left in Britain? It's not because Rishi Sunak or Sir Keir Starmer, to be honest, actually care about anti-Semitism or Jews in this country. Why is it that they support Israel? Why is it that the state and the ruling class was so terrified of a man like Jeremy Corbyn getting into number 10, someone who dares to stand with the Palestinians? Why is it? Well, as people have said, apartheid was made in Britain with Lord Balfour in 1917, and actually apartheid, we enable apartheid now today. We have an interest in the Israeli state. The bombs that people have spoken about, some of them say made in Britain when they are dropped in Gaza. And this is something that we have to say, we've spoken about out there. People are making profit and the British state is included in that. That is why they were scared of Jeremy Corbyn, not because they care about racism. And I think then, in my final minute or so, how do we then turn the struggle for Palestine into a revolutionary struggle? Well, like I said, that Israel didn't exist in a vacuum. Palestinians do not either. Palestinians make up the majority of the population in Jordan and in Lebanon. There's over 1 million Palestinians living and working in Syria. And actually, they don't exist in a vacuum there. Palestinians are part of the working class. They are part of the struggles in these countries as well against their own oppressors. And we have to say that we want to try and fuse resistance within the Middle East to try and fight for Palestine. We want to see people rising up in all of the neighbouring regions of Palestine to topple the dictators and the rulers of their own regime and fly the Palestinian flag when they are doing it. It is through international and working class solidarity across the region that will be the route to the liberation of Palestine. It is through revolution and attacking the states that work with Israel that we have to try and win this liberation. Because as I said, this is about a network of imperialism. Therefore, this is an anti-imperialist struggle. People may have heard the phrase, the road to Palestine runs through Cairo. This is what we mean. We have to look to the working classes of the Middle East and say that we have to have solidarity with Palestine in everything that we do. And actually, we think that this ain't a pipe dream, is it? It's not a pipe dream, actually. We see struggles in this country and in the region time and time again, in living memory. You know, think about the October riots in Algeria in 1988. They were sparked by the first Intifada of 87. Think about think about the revolution in Egypt in 2011, the Arab Spring. Think about Sudan in 2019 and the ongoing struggles. The pre-history of these struggles was awash with Palestinian solidarity. And when they toppled those dictators, they flew the Palestinian flag. This is what we want to see when we come. This is what we want to see across the entire world. So look, just to finish the mirror, I want to reiterate some things because I stand with Palestinians every single time they resist. They are brave and their might is inspirational. Never have they suppressed to Israeli apartheid or bowed down to it. They've always fought that, no matter what the Israelis have thrown at them. They're an absolute inspiration. But what we want to see is a fuse of the struggle with Palestine and wider class struggle in the region. That means it's a fight against imperialism. It's a fight against the system that produces these things. And that's a fight against capitalism. For the last 75 years, Palestinians have resisted Israeli apartheid, and we have stood with them every step of the way. And we will do it for another 75 more years if we have to. And I think what we have to say is we have to fight against that system. We have to take down with the Israeli apartheid regime. And as the other speakers have said, we have to say free Palestine. So look, thank you everyone.
Okay, so now we're going to move into the discussion part of the meeting. So I'm going to call people one followed by the other. Everyone has to come up to speak at the podium here, so you can be heard around the room and online. And I'm going to keep people to 3 minutes, and that's really important because we need to get quite a few contributions in, and I'll tell you when you've got 1 minute left. So first we've got Nafal followed by Hannah. Oh no, sorry. Nafal followed by a question that I'm going to read out by Hannah.
So I wanted to talk about an experience I had in over the last year, really. In April 2022, I took part in an action with Palestine Action at the Leicester Elbit site. For doing that, I was charged with 2 offences. My trial for that took place just this last March, and I thought I'd just relay some of the experiences I had on the witness stand. When we testified that the reason that we took part in the action was that we were trying to prevent the slaughter of Palestinians, I was asked by the state prosecutor whether or not Israelis had the same right to live in peace that I clearly felt Palestinians did. My co-defendant was asked whether they knew how many rockets Hamas had launched on Israel. Anyone who knows anything about this situation knows how absurd of a question this is. Both questions. The sheer inequality of the experience of Israeli and Palestinians is not even a concern to these people. They would rather just make false equivalences about the situation just so that they can avoid any moral indictments. The population density of Gaza is so high that even precision missiles inevitably kill non-combatants. An expert witness was called to testify about this at our trial, but the judge ruled him to be partisan simply because he concluded that because of that, it was wrong to buy those missiles. And that somehow makes him a partisan. And my question is, wouldn't any reasonable person say it's wrong to buy those missiles if it is going to inevitably kill innocent people? The state likes to say that there's such a thing as equality before the law, but what I found out was that that is a pure fantasy. It's a pure lie. The state does not treat people the same. It may promise equality before the law, but it never does that. It's not a neutral arbiter of justice. It's an instrument of oppression. It's an instrument of class rule. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to read a question out, which is, we as socialists support the right of self-determination for the Palestinians. Should socialists support the right to self-determination of the Israelis? Okay, so the next contribution is going to be from Sophie Griffith, followed by Rob Ferguson. And if maybe the second contribution wants to get up to be ready, so we can cut that on the time.
Thanks, comrades, for having me here. Just wanting to do another massive shout out for Palestine Action, of course. We have 7 comrades in prison at the moment, political prisoners, imprisoned by the state for taking direct action against Israel's largest arms company. Individual people losing their liberty against an international arms company. And I'm here to speak today to call everybody in this room to support Palestine Action. We need a mass movement around the direct action that is being taken, because people have given up their liberty to do that. I want to call everybody here, get online, follow Palestine Action on Twitter, on Instagram, look at their website, get involved, get down to the siege in Leicester. 62 days Palestine Action have been holding that factory. So yeah, massive call out, everybody get on social media, share everything from Palestine Action, get to the protests. We need a mass movement.
Thank you. So Rob Ferguson is going to be followed by Sajia Iqbal.
On Monday, the Tory government is going to be introducing into Parliament the second reading of its anti-BDS legislation, which will prevent public bodies, local authorities, universities, encompassing student unions from boycotting or disinvesting from Israel. The legislation is framed to allow exceptions that you might just guess at: China, Russia, and others. Written into the legislation is the preclusion of any exception in the case of Israel. There will be no ability to present a case for making an exception for the colonial settler state. And in addition, there's the legislative threat against any representative of a public body expressing the desire, wish to boycott or disinvest if it wasn't for the legislation. That will be illegal also. Now, I hear there's a parliamentary opposition. We now hear that the leadership of the Labour Party are whipping every MP to abstain on the vote. And if they break that whip, they will have the whip removed and they will no longer be Labour MPs. I hate to say this, I predict that the number of votes from left Labour MPs and others is likely to be 0. Finally, this. Look, that legislation is sending out a message of impunity. It's sending out a message of impunity to the likes of Ben Gvir, National Security Minister. It's sending out a message of impunity
One
to
minute left.
Smotrich and the others. And the context is this: last week, pogroms were launched by settlers in 17 villages. Hundreds of armed settlers torching homes and cars and firing at residents. Ben Gvir called on the settlers to run to the hilltops, a reference to the most violent hilltop settler youth. He called the pogroms civilian counteractions. He said we have to fight terrorists and execute them, not one or two, but tens and hundreds, and if necessary, even thousands. To abstain on that vote on Monday is more than a disgrace, it's a crime. And 2 o'clock, there will be a demonstration outside Parliament, and if anyone can make it, we should do so. But also, we should try and put that legislation to the test in every university campus, every student union, every local authority that we can.
Followed by Lewis Nielsen.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Sophia. I went to Palestine in February 2023 as part of the National Education Union. We have 2 visits a year. One was in February, one takes place in October. What was quite interesting is we look at the children. When we visited schools, we noticed that there were very cold conditions in their classrooms. They were sitting there with their coats on, hoping to have an education, which we believe is the right of every single child in the world. These children do not have resources so they could learn about their own identity, so they can actually know what their roots are. So I just want to touch on that. So that's really, really important. They don't have enough resources to continue to learn, to have a normal life, to be able to have the freedom to travel, to explore, to have an exchange project. They can only see the sea from the roof of their houses. And you have to have an eyewitness account to be able to see it. And do not let the authorities put you off from visiting Palestine. I urge every single one of you in this room, please go to Palestine. Do not feel intimidated or disheartened. We are the voice of these people. We are the voice of these children. Their curriculum is actually being taught to them, but unfortunately, a Palestinian teacher is offered more money to teach the Israeli curriculum. 25%. It's horrendous. A Palestinian teacher receives 25% of that salary of an Israeli teacher. Schools are offered financial incentives to disregard the books which have the history of Palestine. They replace them with textbooks. You have to be able to go into a classroom and to engage with the teachers there to be able to understand. And there is a teachers' union. They were on strike when we were there, which was quite interesting to see. Solidarity to them as well. So that was quite interesting. How do we identify Palestinian houses? They've got black storage tanks, water tanks on their roofs. That's how you identify a Palestinian home. They are deprived of water. There are water shortages in the summer when it's blasting with heat. The children, their smiles are amazing, and those memories stay with you forever. Do not let the authorities put you off from visiting Palestine. Thank you. We are all Palestinians.
Okay. Just before I bring Lewis, I've just got 2 short questions as well from the team in the audience. One of them is, can you comment on how anti-Semitic it is for Keir Starmer to expel more Jews from the Labour Party than ever before? And then the second one is, what would you say to those who say they're pro-Palestinian but do not support direct action or armed resistance? And that one I think is specifically for Lowkey. So I'm going to take Lewis Nielsen, followed by our final speaker, who will be Christine Buckholz.
I want to return to the question that was asked about what about self-determination for Israelis. In recent years, there have been 3 significant reports from Amnesty, from Human Rights Watch, and from B'Tselem, the organisation based in Israel, using the word apartheid to describe the Israeli state. And those reports detail the everyday life facing Palestinians in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Jerusalem, and in Israel itself. What those reports don't conclude is that apartheid stems from the racism at the heart of the Zionist project. The idea that it's a Jewish-only state. So if you're Jewish, you can settle in Israel, but if you're Palestinian, you can't return home. And surely our answer has to be that any just solution in the region has to allow the right of Palestinian refugees to return home. It has to allow the Palestinian diaspora to return home. And if you look at the call from the BDS organizations and civil society in Palestine, they say they want to return home, and they don't talk about wreaking revenge. They say they want a society of equal rights, where they have equal rights as citizens with the Jewish people living on that land. And all of that, I think, exposes the sham of the peace process which we've seen. This year marks 30 years since Oslo, 30 years since the Oslo Accords. In that time, what's happened? The Oslo Accords didn't just wipe the historic crimes of Israel. The Oslo Accords have intensified the process of apartheid. Ethnic cleansing and the Nakba is not something historic. It's something that's ongoing today. That racism at the heart of the Israeli state, which allows new waves of settlers to settle in Israel, it drives further land grabs, further evictions like the one in Sheikh Jarrah. And therefore, I think the answer to say to that is to say that the block to peace, the block to any kind of solution, isn't about which form the Palestinian resistance takes. It's about the nature of the Israeli state as a whole, and it being a racist and apartheid state. Final point I just want to make. Despite all this, it is remarkable that the Palestinians fight back. Sometimes they fight back in an everyday sense, resisting a guard at a checkpoint. But there are times when the Palestinian struggle reaches immensely high points. The intifadas, like the unity intifada that we saw in May 2021, we shouldn't forget the agency of the Palestinians in terms of them fighting back. What does it mean here? Rob talked about the Labour Party. My view is that you can tell a person's politics from where they stand on Palestine. If you're prepared to throw one of the most oppressed people in the world under the bus, then you will fall for anything. We need more people in Britain standing up for Palestine, linking it to the struggles and linking it to a fight against the whole imperialist system.
I'm not contributing quickly, and I'm really sorry about the last contributions, but thank you so much for everyone that did contribute.
Yeah, my name is Christina. I'm also a comrade of Ramsis from March 21 in Germany, and I was an MP for the Left Party for 12 years. And Rob spoke about the BDS legislation in Britain. So what we had in Germany was in 2019 a motion brought in by the government and the Green Party to condemn BDS, and this was the basis of groups who invited people who were linked to BDS or supposed to be linked to BDS, that these rooms were not given by public by the cities by different cities or public authorities, and this was immensely attack on the Palestine solidarity movement. And on the wider left and internationalist forces. I'm very proud that the left party, even though it's not clear on Palestine, did vote no, it didn't abstain to this vote in Parliament. And I urge every MP in the British Parliament of the Labour Party, which is in solidarity with the Palestinians, to vote no against this disgraceful law. the effects of the BDS resolution were immense. Solidarity groups criminalized. The Documenta art exhibition in Kassel last year, there was a huge attack on the one Grupa collective, an art group from Indonesia, and the whole event, which was marvelous, it was the best Documenta I ever saw, was attacked as being anti-Semitic, which was really disgraceful. Then we had the demo bans, and Ramzi talked about it. So I was also standing with the activists and being and I had a pen sentence which I contested in court. And we are 25 people, and we are fined more than 8,000 euros for having a 1 minute solidarity action in Berlin, which is really ridiculous. And so I think it's very important that we show solidarity. People are afraid, and it's not absurd, because this legislation and the criminalization means that people are threatened to lose jobs or being smeared. And so it's important that we stand up and give them confidence to stand against these attacks. Okay, it's important to have solidarity. And as our rulers are connected in dismissing and criminalizing Palestine solidarity, we have to get connected internationally to stand together, to link arms and stand against these attacks. So we stand for equal rights for every person. This is the lesson out of the horrors of the Nazi regime in Germany. So we don't let us be divided. So, and this is what my message is to you. We have to stand firmly and give people confidence that it's right to stand up against this discrimination and this demonization of Palestine solidarity.
So just before we go back to our speakers, to the panel of speakers, I've just got a few short announcements to make. So the first one is that the session tomorrow morning on France has a new title, which is France in Revolt, Strikes, Riot and Resistance. We'll be hearing from French activists about the riots taking place after the horrific death of a teenager at the hands of the police. And also tomorrow, if you want to join the Radical Bloomsbury walking tour with David Rosenberg, you must register. So you can do that tonight on the registration desk or at 9:30 tomorrow, and the tour is at 10 a.m. And also tonight, Marxism is going to be taking over the Institute of Education bar. We've been doing it at Molly's the other night, but tonight it's the Institute of Education bar, and it's just literally across from the road from here. So please join us after the final session and we can carry on the conversation. Also, just want to direct everyone to bookmarks. These books will all be able to be bought there, and they've also got some great selection of other books. And finally, if you like what you've heard and you want to get involved or hear more about the Socialist Workers' Party, please speak to the people from our membership team and speak to someone with the red forms. Okay, so I'm going to head over to Ramzi to start off the sum-ups.
So I want to begin with what I've ended in the input. Actually, the importance of internationalism we see with this anti-BDS resolution. What we witnessed 4 years ago in Germany, they can be drawn from that experience, and we have to learn from each other's experience. The end of the song are the demo bands in Berlin, and demo bands, and they are trying to copy it in other cities too. So be very much aware of what is happening there, because the same thing happened in Germany, and they were criminalizing us in any way, forbidding rooms with this new McCarthyism. And the important thing is, if you are faced with a situation like that, where you can lose your job or anything, it's similar to a strike. If one factory worker is sitting out of the factory gates and saying, I'm striking, they can kick him out. if we all stand up together collectively and say, we won't accept this, they can't kick all of us out. And that's what's so important for solidarity in times like these. So what are they actually doing when they are saying BDS is anti-Semitic and it's forbidden? What are they actually doing when they are saying self-defense and the right to resist in Palestine is terrorism and is forbidden too? They are giving us the opportunity and the option of a fake peace process that is nothing more than a fig leaf for settlements and occupation and the ongoing Nakba, and we won't accept this. We can't accept this because what they are actually saying with this is die in silence and don't resist. And we won't be silenced and we will resist as Palestinians and as supporters. When it comes to the question then of the Israeli society and its question of self-determination, we have to keep in mind what the Israeli society is. It's a settler society supported by imperialism. How can we talk about self-determination in that case?
It's also a society of human beings.
It is a society of human beings, but my cousin is a human being too, and when he wants to go from Sophia to Palestine, even though he lived his entire life in Palestine, he is not allowed to go there. If someone from Brooklyn converts to Judaism this day, he can go to Israel. Is he a new people? Is there a new self-determination? Obviously, it's the right for human beings to exist and to live together, and no matter the ethnicity or whatever. But this is a deflection. This is an abstraction from what is actually the question and the facts on the ground. Because the so-called term also of the right to exist doesn't mean the right of Jews to exist, but the right of racism to exist, the right of racial discrimination and an apartheid system to exist, what is in the DNA of Zionism. And I wholeheartedly oppose this, and we should all oppose this as socialists and as people who are fighting against racism, against imperialism, and for people's right to exist, and not for racism's right and imperialism's right.
You don't have to be a revolutionary socialist to believe you cannot have different laws for different people based on their race and their ethnicity. I mean, to be honest, I cannot get my head around people who think it is okay that if you happen to be of Jewish origin, you have a right to go to Israel tomorrow and claim citizenship. But families who've been living for generations in the most squalid conditions in refugee camps in Lebanon are denied that right. I mean, I honestly would ask the comrade or friend who asked to just look at the conditions that Palestinians are living in Beirut and in refugee camps in Lebanon. What have they done to deserve that? And who has the right to say that they do not have the right to return home and live as freely as their people in the land of Palestine? I mean, to me, this is elementary. And anybody who is progressive or left-wing anywhere finds obnoxious the idea that you have a state that is based on privileging an ethnic group, a religious group, a racial group, one over the other. It's obnoxious. It would not be accepted anywhere else. But yet somehow it is deemed acceptable in terms of the Zionist project. It is abhorrent. And it is the duty of anybody who opposes racism to stand against that vile, filthy regime. And I mean, when you look at Smotrich and Ben Gvir, if there was any doubt, not that there was any doubt, oh my God, these people are absolutely disgusting. They are disgusting. And I'll give you another example. I was at a conference. I was asked to speak at a Palestinian in Europe conference in Malmo recently. And it was really a shocking indication of where sort of the wrong politics gets you. It was a huge conference of Palestinians from all over the world about the Nakba, 75 years of the Nakba. It was due to be speakers from the left party in Sweden speaking, MPs, along with others. And I met with one of them on the Friday night. He had a speech, he was ready to speak at this conference. But on the later on the Friday night, there was a media storm which was stirred up by the far right in Sweden and the Israeli government and the Israeli embassy, and shockingly, Fatah, against the conference, attacking the conference and saying anybody who was at this conference was an anti-Semite and a terrorist. And the next day, that left MP had disappeared. It was absolutely shocking. And that brings me to the main point I want to make about, this anti-BDS bill. It's unbelievable that they can get away with this. But that is to do with the lack of politics that is clear in opposition to imperialism and indeed capitalism. Right, that's what it's got to do with. And the example of the left party in Sweden is indicative of that. As it is to do, I lay the blame for all that at Keir Starmer's door and the Labour Party. Right? If you are not clear, and indeed with social democratic Labour-style parties who remember have a rotten history of capitulating to imperialism going right back to the First World War. If you are not clear on your opposition to imperialism, you open the door for this rotten, filthy politics. And that is why it is ultimately, it's about politics. And why building a revolutionary socialist organization that is absolutely clear in its anti-imperialism, in its internationalism, and consequently in its absolute solidarity with Palestinian resistance against a vile apartheid colonial state that has no place in a civilized, decent society. And that we need to build a movement against it. And the last point I just want to make is Sylvia's point about internationalism being absolutely key. We haven't fully liberated Ireland from colonialism and the horrors of sectarianism that were imposed, as I said, in a model that was later exported to Palestine. But insofar as we've liberated a substantial amount of the country from the yoke of British imperialism, it was always linked, the revolutionary resistance in Ireland was always linked to wider international movements of revolt. Whether it was the United Irishmen being inspired by the French Revolution, whether it was James Connolly and the revolutionary period that was linked to the revolutionary explosions of 1917 and all over Europe, whether it was the civil rights movement of the late 1960s being linked to the wider international explosions against the system of imperialism and capitalism, that is similarly the case with the Palestinian resistance today. There is no doubt the Palestinians will continue to resist because they have no choice and they have the right to use whatever means are necessary to resist their oppression. But in order to be victorious, that has to be linked to a struggle against a rotten autocratic regimes that are also propped up by imperialism in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf states, and linked to a wider fight against Western imperialism, British, American, European, and all of them.
So now I'm going to invite Lowkey as well.
Thank you. So it's a question of something that Yusuf al-Kabir, who was an Iraqi Jewish lawyer in the 1930s, termed militant archaeology. What do we mean by that? So, London was founded by the Roman Empire. It was originally a military base by the name of Londinium in 46 AD. Now, can anyone conceivably say that an Italian person would have the right to come and take a home away from somebody living in Scarborough, for example, or in South London or in North London? No, you would say this is somebody with deep delusions. To believe that you can back project yourself 3,000 years is simply not a reality-based way of understanding the world. And I think it's important to be clear. Zionism is rubbish. It's rubbish. It has no basis in material reality. The other point that I think is important to make is if you look at the anti-BDS bill, this is the product of long-term lobbying by specific organizations. We look at the killing of Corbynism. This was the fruit of the labor of several open organizations. So, for example, the Board of Deputies in 2020, the year after defeating Corbyn in the election, put in their very own trustees report, we have, and I'm quoting here, a close working relationship with the Israeli embassy and strengthened links to the Ministry of Strategic Affairs and the IDF spokesman's department. We have to be clear. Organizations like the Board of Deputies, like the CST, have worked tirelessly 24/7, day in, day out against you. They worked against Corbynism and they worked to bring this anti-BDS bill into Parliament. How long are we going to continue to play the man instead of the ball? How long are we going to allow a situation where specific organizations who are funded by specific people, this is publicly accessible information, are able to dominate political life in this country to such an extent and basically determine who can and who can't be in certain political parties? The key here also to remember is, when questioning this idea of the effectiveness of direct action, that's fine, people can have different roles that they can play in this process. However, let's look at this. We've attempted for many years through the Corbyn project to get into the political system in this country. What happened? People lost their livelihoods, people lost their reputations, people were smeared right, left and centre. Okay, Palestine Action has for a few years been active, and what it has achieved is under a Tory government the cancelling of £280 million worth of contracts for Israel's largest arms company. That could not happen. That could not happen under the government. And that's true, right? So how was it that you have attempting to operate through the political system, delivering you further back, operating outside of the political system and taking these steps, forces those within the political system to heal? And that is what has happened, just simply as a stating of facts that have played out over this time. So that's what I would say to somebody questioning the effectiveness of direct action, is that simply the proof is in the pudding. Yes, there are larger risks which are real, and people will have different situations that will determine how clearly they can engage with stuff like that. But the bottom line is we have to garner a criticality about questions of infrastructure, but also questions about organizational policy. We have to look at the organizations who have actively made it their business and their function to suppress this type of activity we are talking about, because it's all there for you to see. Thank you.
We're just going into our last speaker, Sophia Beach, to end the meeting. Thanks.
So look, on the question, should socialists support the self-determination of Israelis? Look, I think Ramsis came back on it brilliantly, but I also want to say something as well. In a nutshell, no, because what does the self-determination of Israelis actually look like? it looks like what the state of Israel does to Palestinians, right? It's what is the self-determination or the right to self-determination of Israelis, but it's about stealing land off of Palestinians. I think this is obviously what we have to come back to time and time again. And, you know, when my grandma is older than the state of Israel, I think that should bring the legitimacy of these sorts of rights to self-determination into question, actually. And I think that the reason why we shouldn't be in favour of the right to self-determination of the Israeli state is because the Israeli state is a racist endeavour. It has racism enshrined into its very ideology. You know, the very meaning of a Jewish-only state means that Palestinians, Muslims and Arabs within that state have to be suppressed. They have to be pushed out. You know, this is what we have to keep going back to. But, you know, people have mentioned, I think rightly so, that somebody could convert to Judaism and then claim citizenship to Israel. Israel may be a Jewish, or claim that it wants to be a Jewish-only state. It's not for all Jews, though. Look, I haven't tried it yet, but I'm pretty sure if I applied for an Israeli passport, even though all of my granddad's family died in the Holocaust, I'm pretty sure they would reject me. I think there's far too many videos on YouTube of me calling for the destruction of the Israeli state for them to accept it, right? So it's not that deep, is it, right? I don't want people to come into these things. And actually, when we talk about Zionism, I'm not just against the Zionist project because of what it does in material reality and in practice. I'm against Zionism because of its theoretical roots, if you can call them that. As Lowkey said, Zionism is rubbish. Theodor Herzl, who's probably known as the sort of architect of Zionism, when he was sort of creating it and thinking about the Zionist project, he wrote to a man called Cecil Rhodes. Don't know if people in this room have heard of Cecil Rhodes, but in a letter, he said to Cecil Rhodes, you are key in helping, sorry, I fucked up that word. You're key in helping make history. I write to you because it doesn't involve Africa, but a piece of Asia Minor, not Englishmen, but Jews. I write to you because it is something colonial. That is it. From the words of the architect himself, that is what the Zionist project is about. There's another claim that lots of Zionists make that I think we have to reject as socialists as well. They say that Jews have to assimilate because anti-Semitism is endemic within society. We have to reject that claim. There is nothing natural about any kind of racism within capitalism. People are not born with racist ideas. There is nothing natural about racism. There is nothing inevitable about it. Actually, racism is taught. It is taught from the top, and it is used to divide the working class. There's nothing natural about anti-Semitism. Therefore, these arguments about assimilation, don't actually quite follow. People may not know, but in 1897, the first Zionist conference took place in Basel. In October of that same year, a group of revolutionary socialist Jews called the Bund was formed. I don't think that the fact that they happened in the same year is a coincidence, by the way. And Jewish socialists in the Bund, they said, in order to fight anti-Semitism, which was a massive issue in Western Europe at the time, and it still is today. I'm not trying to diminish that question. They said in order to fight anti-Semitism, we have to fight against all kinds of racism and against the system that creates it. And that's the tradition that I'm proud to stand with. So look, I think in my final minute then, what I want to say is that we want to see an end to the Israeli state, but to be honest, I want to see an end to all states. I want to live in a world without borders, but we have to call out Israel because it is unique, there is apartheid. And what we see, what the Palestinians have shown us, 1993 and all of that, compromise gets you nowhere. And this is what our rulers want us to do, right, isn't it? They want us to compromise. They say that everyone's got to tighten their belts. The cost of living crisis, the nurses, the teachers, the railway drivers, the post workers, they want them to compromise. That ain't going to get us nowhere, actually. We have to fight back against the system. It's the same people who want us to compromise who are forcing through the BDS bill, who are given more powers to misogynistic, racist, killer cops, who are limiting the power to strike. We cannot compromise with these people at the top. And actually, on the Labour Party, shame on the MPs who will abstain on that BDS bill. Who considers themselves an anti-racist, their hypocrisy is ridiculous. I cannot cannot believe the hypocrisy. Any anti-racist should be pro-Palestinian, because that is where you can see some of the most blatant racism today. So then, just to finish with, people that have been asked to join the Socialist Workers' Party throughout Marxism Festival. If you agree with what we say, if you agree with the liberation of Palestine, you should think about joining these red forms. People may not know the Socialist Workers' Party was founded by a man called Tony Cliff. He was a Jewish man born in British Mandate Palestine in 1917. And what he saw there as he was growing up was what based and formed his ideas about fighting for a world of socialism. He saw the racism that Palestinians experienced from the early Zionist settlers in 1917. He saw what things like the Balfour Declaration were doing, and he committed his life not just to fighting for a free Palestine, but fighting against a system that creates the material conditions for something like Palestine to exist. So therefore, if you join the SWP, we will never compromise on our politics of Palestine. We will always say free Palestine, but we want to see a world where the occupied people in every single corner are liberated. We want to see freedom for Kurdistan, freedom for Kashmir, and freedom for Palestine. And that way we're in the socialism. So, thank you. If everyone wants to head over to the Institute, then carry on the conversation.